So hello friends, today I'm going to show you a comparison between these two lenses. One is the Nikkor 50mm 1.4G and then the other is the Nikkor 50mm 1.8G. So I decided to make this comparison because I have seen many times on the internet this question being asked is, should I get the 1.4G or the 1.8G? For the 1.4G it is worth the extra money or not? And then let's say the ubiquitous answer is go with the 1.8G. The 1.4G is a piece of junk. And then I told myself, okay, this is a bit harsh and then a bit unfair, so I got these two lenses that I'm going to test and compare for you. Well, it is actually you who are going to do the comparison, because I would like to remain as neutral as possible. I'm just going to show you the images. I'm going to give my opinions, but then it is up to you to decide which lens is best. Okay, so let's start with the comparison. In terms of construction, there isn't much to say. They look exactly the same. Construction is exactly the same. There is one thing in these lenses, in the AFS lenses, that I like and I don't like at the same time, is that they have this built-in motor. So this is the thing I like. So I can use them on my regular Nikon cameras like D700 for example, or I can use it also on my mirrorless camera like the Nikon Z, and then they're going to work perfectly, including the autofocus. Okay, that's a good thing. The bad thing is that the built-in motor is going to die someday. So this lens is not going to last forever like an AES lens, for example. Okay, that's all for the construction. You can see it, essentially plastic, well built anyway, but still plastic. Okay, that's all for that, and then now I'm just going to proceed to the image comparison. So, and to do so, I'm going to stop the video for a few seconds. So let's start the comparison with the closest focusing distance these two lenses can make, which is exactly the same, and then is 45 centimeters. And then for the comparisons I prepare this image here. Just let me put it full size. I made this composition, and then what I tried to do was to get an equilibrium between colors, bokeh, and then here sharpness and aberrations and that kind of stuff, which we can see by very steep changes of contrast. And then let me explain to you each element of the image. If you recognize this character, give yourself a like. If you don't, I will tell you, is the Chapulín Colorado, a really popular character in Latin America and in Mexico especially. Okay, so that's for this character. I put this blue lamp on the back, and then the idea is to see how the bokeh evolves and then how the bokeh behaves in the two lenses. And then here I use the lens calibration target, which has a lot of fine lines, so I use it first to get the focusing right, so the images are actually comparable. And then here, as I told before, the really steep changes in contrast can give you an idea of spherical aberrations and that kind of stuff you can see in lenses. So right now making a comparison is not really meaningful because we don't have exactly the same aperture here. If you were wondering, this lens here is the 1.4 that you can see the bokeh bubbles are quite big, and then here we have the 1.8G obviously, which has smaller bokeh bubbles. Then let's take a first glance of the images. I will mention the advantages of each of the lenses, at least what I think, and then you can make your own conclusions. So here, first thing you can see You can see it here on the 0. I can make it even bigger. The 1.8G is sharper, look sharper here. You can see it here immediately. And then here the 1.4 is not as sharp, but then it has many other advantages. First one being that the aperture is bigger. You're getting like 67% more light. And then the bokeh bubbles are nicer. And then other thing I also think is important here, the 1.4G is given a bit more richer colors. You can perceive here a lot of purple, and then here the red. Well, reds look almost equivalent, but in the face you can perceive that the tones are slightly warmer. So that's the first thing. And then now we're going to move to an actual comparison. So what I'm going to do is to put the 1.4, I will put it at f2, and then the 1.8 I will put it at f2 as well, so we have exactly the same settings. Okay, the image, well, the computer is making crazy things. Okay, here's right. Okay, here we are at f2. We have settings which are the same. I forgot to mention the images were taken with a Nikon Z7 camera, so we are talking about 45 megapixels, so I think we have enough resolution, so we can see almost all the things the lens can produce. So here I told you before, a bit of warmer colors, and then the trade-off is that the sharpness on the 1.4G is not as good, but then my hypothesis is that the 1.4G has been designed with portraits in mind, because here you have, even though the aperture is the same, the bokeh bubbles are slightly bigger, and then the rendering is a bit creamy and smooth, which is really good when you're making portraits, because you don't want to have like a pimple or pores or whatever in a nice portrait. And with a lens that is too sharp, this is the kind of stuff you need to correct after in post-processing. So my guess is that the 1.4G has been designed for portraits and not paying a lot of attention to sharpness. And then here, if we get close, we can see here, okay, come on, move, we can get, yeah, we can get a good idea here around the 0 for the sharpness. And then here you can see a spherical aberration, which is probably corrected in the 1.8G. And then, speaking of such, my guess is that the, okay, come on, the 1.8G that we have here has been designed to more general photography purposes, because it's a bit sharper, and then, yeah, handles other things better, so you get best quality on the frame. So yeah, more general purpose photography. And then here we're talking more of a lens which is made for portraits because of the smooth rendering. Okay, now I jump quickly to 2.8 in both lenses, and then here, okay, both images have loaded, computer is not bothering me anymore. Both lenses, the 2.8 is getting sharper, no surprises here. I can start perceiving a bit of flare, which is appearing here. Still, the color rendering, I like it better on the 1.4, and then the sharpness here, still the 1.8 in my opinion, has the advantage here. We can say that by getting this thing close. Okay, here I'm 50%. I shouldn't have used the Nikon Z7 camera because the image that it produces are quite huge. But then here you can see the shapes are quite sharp, the jump in contrast, whereas here you have a small difference and then even some chromatic aberration, which we can also see here. Let me go back just a bit, and then here we can see something which is interesting and then is related to the lens design. Here on the 1.4 we can see we have essentially back focusing, whereas here on the 1.8G we have some back focusing and then some front focusing, and then this is some stuff which is really important to know when you are focusing and then how you handle your lens. So I mean, for example, if we're going to take a face with this lens, I will make my focus on the tip of the nose, so I know the rest of the face is going to be in focus, I would say. And then here I can take probably the back of the nose as a reference, so the front will be sharp as well as the rest of the face. This is the kind of stuff you need to know, and then you can get familiar with your lens. Okay, we're really close. Now I'm going to jump to f4 in butt lenses. No surprises here. As before, the 1.4 is giving back focusing, and then here some front focusing and back focusing. Oh, come on, don't die on me. Okay, got scared there for a second. Here a lot of sharpness as before, and then if we get away we can see that the two images are actually getting good, both of them. Then just for the sake of completeness I will show you both images at 5.6. Okay, I will let you make your analysis. I'm not going to say much. Okay, here what I can see is that the tones are richer still on the 1.4. This has probably a relation with the coatings. And then here I'm going to jump just right now to f8, which I found for the 1.4 to be a really remarkable aperture setting. The images are really good. You suffer here from a bit of flare, but then this is something personally I like because it gives some character to the image, obviously if it is well handled. Here you don't get any. Is it good or no? I don't know. I prefer the flare personally. Here you can see the color. We can see that the 1.4 has actually got really sharp as well. We can see it here on the around the 0. Okay, we have it here around the 0. There is the contrast has gotten really good. I would say almost the same for both lenses. You can see it here on the details. these pieces of dust. They are looking really good on the 1.4. Well, here they are looking good as well. I would say both lenses are quite equivalent. At f8, go back, and then here if we go to f11, I would say we don't have any more difference. Here we have the stars, only difference here we have the flare, and then as I told before, and then as I have been saying all along, is that the 1.4 seems to produce more rich palette of colors. Okay, so this is all for the close focusing comparison. Now we're going to move to a more regular distance, probably 2 or 3 meters that I made while making the photos, and then I'm going to prepare that, so see you in a few seconds. Here we are for the second set of comparisons. Here we're working at what I call a normal working distance, and then that means I am about 3 meters away from this doll, and then I use the nose of this doll here to make the focusing, and then here already we can see a sharpness difference, but then here as before we have the 1.4 at 1.4, here we have the 1.8 at 1.8, and then obviously it is a sharpness difference because this lens here is wide open, large aperture, and then here, well, we are also wide open, but the aperture is just smaller. And then we saw before that the 1.8 has a sharpness advantage at a short distance. Is this true for a long distance? This I cannot tell you. Let's just talk about the general image. So I took this image here, these elements. I took the dolls here as main subject because my wife made them for the 40th anniversary of my parents-in-law, which was like about 2 weeks ago, and then the rest of the frame was kindly provided by my daughter, who told me, "Papa, go into my room, there is a lot of stuff, really colorful things, have fun there, enjoy." And then here obviously we have, as a little girl room, many colorful things. And then first thing we can notice here, I told you before, the 51.4G was probably designed for portraits and then to have a nice bokeh, but then what we see here is quite a bit disappointing because we don't see like a nice and creamy out of focus zone. We can recognize almost everything what is behind, and then this is not due to the lens but to the focal distance, which is quite short, and then the autofocus areas are proportional to the magnification of the lens, which is quite small, so they get large, so the zones out of focus are not really out of focus. So if you want to use this lens, the 51.4G, for portraits, you have to be aware of that and use it at a close distance, I don't know, maybe 1 meter, 1.5 meters, to get nice portraits and then also nice bokeh behind. Besides that, we have what we already saw before. We have a color rendition here which is a bit warmer, I have to say. This thing looks pinker, this thing looks here a bit more yellow, I don't know, it's hard to tell, to be honest, but then I feel this image more warm, more welcoming. Is it because of the aperture? I cannot tell you. Then there was something I noticed that I didn't tell you before. It was that the 51.4G, it has a bit of lower contrast, so you can see more details on the image. The 1.4 with 1.8G has a bit more contrast. This is probably due to the coating, and then here you don't have as much details, for example here on the reflections of the table and the chair. So enough for the talking, we're not doing any comparison yet. So what I'm going to do is just to put the 1.4, I'm going to move it at f2, the 1.8, I'm going to move it to f2 as well. Then we can start talking about comparison. So at a distance the images look, I have to say, quite the same, with the difference of coloring that we have already spoken a lot. So what I'm going to do is to get close, and then we have here the face of the doll, and then I don't know if I told you before, but then I did the focusing on the nose of the doll. So the face of this doll here should be the sharpest part of the image, and then I intentionally put the face of this second doll here almost in the same plane to get it as sharp as possible. And then here what we can see is that the difference in sharpness that we saw before at a close distance is not that abysmal as we saw it before. Before there was like a huge difference. Here honestly I don't see it very much. I am here at a crop of 100%, and then maybe these details here are a bit more pronounced here on the 1.8G, but otherwise I don't know, I cannot tell you. Maybe here on this castle here we can see some differences here, but then honestly it is really hard to tell. Yeah, this part here is maybe just a bit more in focus, but then this is probably due as what we saw before, that the 1.8G tends to have a bit of more front focusing, whereas here the 1.4G tends to have pure back focusing. Well, not back focusing, but back depth of field, and then the 1.8G front and back depth of field. So let us get a bit away to explore something else in the image. Well, these parts are out of focus, so not of big interest right now. So what I'm going to do is to proceed to 2.8. Already at 2.8 we saw previously at a close distance that the gap between the two lenses was getting very small, and then here I expect the same thing. So we go back to the face of the doll, and then here as expected difference is I have to be honest with you, I can't see any difference. We can see that the 1.8G has a bit more contrast. You can see it here on the back. Is this a good thing? I cannot tell you. I prefer to get more things on the image and then probably decide on the contrast in post-processing. So, but then this is my opinion. Here on the small details of the castle we can have we can see but images look really nice. Still this element here is maybe a bit more in focus, but otherwise yeah, hard, impossible to tell. So let's jump quickly to f4. Now I can see here from distance I can see actually the difference. I get the feeling that the 1.4G here is actually outperforming the 1.8G, which is also very good. I have to be honest as well. But then let's go to 100%. Sharpness in both lenses is fantastic. Again, I have to, I will sound very repetitive, but still the color rendition on this lens here, 1.4G, is slightly better. This is something I cannot deny. And then in both images, yeah, everything looks really good. So let me get a bit away. Okay, so we start having this element here a bit in focus. Well, no, not really. Look at in focus from a distance. So what I'm going to do, I will try to pull more elements in focus. So we move to 5.6. Here at 5.6 there is any difference whatsoever between the two lenses. You can get any of both. Both are going to do the job beautifully, besides the small difference in color rendition. Let's check here. This small sweater comes in focus. Not really. So let's go to f8, which was the aperture I like the most for the 1.4G. Here on the faces, as before, no difference at all. And then here on the back we have things which have come into focus, well, almost. So let's do last try. Okay, here we have things which have come into focus, and then I don't know you, but I think here we are just a bit sharper with the 1.4G. And then let's try here on the front some of the elements which are on the front, and then here the animals. They look extremely nice in all cases. And then, just for the sake of it, let's go all the way down to f16, and then I don't expect any difference whatsoever here. Here everything should be really nice and in focus. And then this is what we get. Everything very nice details. So my conclusion here is, at a distance these two lenses are identical, starting f4, maybe even f2.8. Main difference actually color rendition, but besides that, all the people who said 1.4G is a really bad lens is unjustified. We have to see it here. We saw actually difference at a really close distance, and then it depends really on the taste of the user, whether he wants to do nice portrait or more general purpose photography. But then what we saw here is that starting from a few meters of focusing distance, both lenses are identical. So it uses the 1.4 because it offers you more luminosity. Go ahead if you can afford it. If not, you can see the 1.8G offers really good possibilities. It is sharp, it is not very expensive. The only thing and honestly don't really like is that the contrast is given by the lens, so you have less chances of working out something in post-processing, whereas here with the 1.4G we can even see here on the ball and you can perceive a bit more details, so you can probably work out that better in post-processing. So this is all I wanted to show you today. Thanks for watching and see you next time.